friendly organisation to help this go through. I think this problem will go away over time because most of the younger generation are using cloud email addresses such as Gmail and others that are available. Or the other thing you can do is you can buy your own domain name. You can buy them very cheaply and you can get your email address and keep it forever.
Now you're talking. Craig, thank you. Craig Young from Two Anns on the panel. The people who run Cadbury's chocolates are in the news again. This is in the UK. Each year, Cadbury is the sponsor for a National Trust event, formerly known as the annual Easter Egg Trail, but now rebranded as the Great British Egg Hunt. And the Archbishop of York says dropping the word Easter from the title goes against everything the company used to stand for, seeing as it was founded by the deeply religious John Campbell in 1824, who is now, by the way, John Campbell referred to online as the founding director of Mondelez, the company which shut down
the money-making Dunedin factory with the loss of how many hundred jobs.
And British Prime Minister Theresa May says this decision is absolutely ridiculous. Do you agree with her?
Yes.
Gary?
Yep, so do I. One of the things I think is really sad is that Cadbury family had a magnificent history, an incredibly early enlightened approach to their staff and their living conditions, and that this gets lost. And I think, I don't know what you guys think, but it almost seems like we're trying to sanitise everything and not offend somebody. And like, I go to the Diwali festival because I enjoy the Indian culture. And this is part of the Christian, I suppose, some link, I don't know, I can't tell, I don't know what it was, but surely we shouldn't sanitise everything, should we, or am I misreading
I completely agree. I mean, I don't adhere to any religion, but I find them all interesting, and you try and partake in as many because you want to learn about people and they're interesting and things like that, so it's just silly.
Cadbury says the event is also for non-Christians. Quote, "We invite people from all faiths and none to enjoy our seasonal treats." But I suppose the obvious question is then, which season would that be?
Which season would that be in? Exactly. And Easter's not a season, it's a religious occasion, a religious holiday. It's not a season.
It is.
New research before we go on chocolate Easter bunnies has revealed that 59% of people eat the ears first. Where do you start with an Easter bunny, can I ask? This is serious research out of Henry Ford Hospital in Detroit, and it's in the journal The Laryngoscope.
I actually have to break them up and then eat bits because I can't cope. If I feel like I'm eating its ear, I feel like I'm eating its ear. So I smash the whole thing up.
Do you?
In one go and eat it in bits.
Oh, that's pretty violent. Okay. Only 4% of people begin by devouring the tail or feet. This is a survey of 28,000 people. 30% of them didn't know what part they started with.
I'm with them. I think they're probably the most sensible people in this.
But the conclusion of the lead researcher is that there's something wrong with eating an Easter bunny's ears first. She says you don't start with the face when presented with a chocolate Santa.
Don't you think this proves that it's time we looked at what our researchers are looking at?
Yeah.
I don't know why you think that. Gary Moore, lovely to have you on the panel.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. See you.
And Alan Reid, you too.
Pleasure.
Thanks for your company, everybody. We're back tomorrow, and Checkpoint follows.
Good everyone, tonight Edge Kim, extraordinary pictures coming from there if you are able to watch us on Freeview Channel 50 or on Facebook. But if you are listening, we have interviewed people who were there, who have lost everything, who have no idea what they've lost, who've been involved in the rescue. Tautini Hahipeni, who took a truck and trailer unit into the middle of the floodwaters and drove about 25 people out. Extraordinary stories. The Mayor will join us live with the latest, and our reporter Zach Fleming is also there live from the scene. Also tonight, the Disabilities Minister lashes out at an IHC service for autistic people, and the latest on the congregation where the typhoid has been. Stay with us, the news next.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon. Ko Katrina Batinaho. An Edgecombe firefighter has described rescuing people and pets as water flooded into the town, turning the streets into rivers. Almost the entire town of 1,600 people has been evacuated after the Rangataiki River burst its banks today. A senior firefighter, Steve Morrissey, says the conditions were horrendous in the Bay of Plenty town and many of the houses will be ruined. Mr Morrissey says the water was already waist deep by the time firefighters started rescuing people.
The guys were getting them out pretty quickly. There was most of them ended up getting rescued by jet boat because it came up so fast. We just couldn't get them until the water was actually around all the houses already.
Edgecombe firefighter Steve Morrissey. One man has described the moment he saw the Rangataiki River's banks breach, sending a torrent of water rushing towards him. Graham Burke, who's lived with his wife Gail on Pureri Crescent in Edgecombe for 43 years, says they have probably lost everything. Mr Burke says he was standing 50 metres from the riverbank when the water broke through. He says he phoned his wife and told her to get out of their home immediately and not try to take anything. Mr Burke says as he drove, the water caught up to his van.
It was unreal. The pressure and the force of the water was just unreal. It was, all rubbish tins and plastic containers and garden gnomes and firewood was all coming down the street. It had washed right through the houses across the road from the break. It had just taken everything out of their sheds.
Graham Burke says his home, along with 400 others, will be a mess and will probably need a total rebuild. In Christchurch, the Heathcote River has burst its banks in the suburb of St Martin's. A small amount of water is covering River Law Terrace and has reached the front gates of 3 properties. It's understood sandbags are on the way. The Transport Agency says it's confident the road to Kaikoura will reopen tomorrow after the town was cut off for most of the day today by bad weather. The inland route to the town was closed late last night because of heavy rain and only reopened for a 3-hour window this afternoon. The other access road, State Highway 1 south of Kaikoura, has been closed since Tuesday with heavy rain bringing down with 5 mud and rock slides. The Transport Agency's earthquake recovery manager, Steve Mutton, says it's unlikely the highway will reopen tomorrow, but there will be access through the inland road.
We're confident the inland route will be open tomorrow. The rain forecast is certainly easing, which means the rivers will come down.
Mr Martin says the route will be monitored overnight. The government is warning that terrorists could target Anzac Day commemorations on the Gallipoli Peninsula. New Zealand has today updated its travel advice for Turkey. The Foreign Minister, Murray McCulley, says the change reflects information received that suggests terrorists may seek to target the Anzac Day events. Mr McCulley says the government continues to advise against all tourist and other non-essential travel to Ankara and Istanbul and recommends caution in Gallipoli and elsewhere in Turkey. Mr McCulley says anyone travelling to Gallipoli for Anzac Day should register on the Safe Travel website and monitor travel advice. A new report shows the Central Otago Lakes region has topped Auckland as the most unaffordable place to buy a house. The Massey University Home Affordability Report shows Central Otago Lake homes affordability fell by 8.2% in the last quarter. The region is now 68% less affordable than the national average value. Median house prices in the southern region are almost 14 times higher than annual wages. The Real Estate Institute's Queenstown spokeswoman, Gail Hudson, says Auckland buyers now make up almost a quarter of her clients at Bailey's Realty.
As prices have moved up in Auckland, people have taken equity out of their properties and have chosen to, probably the baby boomers a lot, chosen to buy down this area here with the view of moving down here later on.
Queenstown realtor Gail Hudson. The Education Minister, Heke Aparata, says schools should call the police if they cannot safely manage violent students. Northland principals have said they might start to suspend violent children until they get more funding to properly support them. In Parliament today, Ms Parata says she agreed with ministry advice to call the police when there was danger to students or staff. It's 5:04. To Sport, and Tom Latham says he has ridden a roller coaster of emotion after being named New Zealand cricket captain. The 25-year-old will replace the unavailable Kane Williamson for the Tri-Series in Ireland ahead of the Champions Trophy tournament in Britain in June. Williamson is one of 10 New Zealand players unavailable due to Indian Premier League commitments. Latham says coach Mike Hesson broached the possibility of leading the side a few weeks ago.
It's a role that I probably wouldn't have thought I'd be doing a few years ago, and to have this opportunity so early on is pretty exciting, but yeah, it's obviously a daunting one as well.
Tom Latham. It's been 8 months since the midfielder Sonny Bill Williams last played a game of rugby, but his Blues coach Tana Umanga says the All Black is still fitter than the majority of his counterparts in the team. Williams will make his Blues debut from off the bench in this Saturday's Super Rugby match against the Highlanders in Dunedin. It's his first game since rupturing his Achilles at the Rio Olympics in August. And the NRL has suspended more than half of the $350,000 worth of fines handed down to 3 clubs for concussion breaches last month. St George, Illawarra and Newcastle will each have $50,000 of their $100,000 fine suspended, while the Gold Coast will pay $50,000 with the other $100,000 suspended. The NRL suspended the fine since it was each of the clubs' first breach. That's the news.
A record-breaking storm.
There's just no way of getting to them at the moment. Once it's daylight, we can reassess whether we can get a tractor or maybe even a helicopter in to help them out.
Some huge rainfall totals accumulated over the past 2 days. Some places have received over 300 millimetres.
With the volumes of water coming down the river, it's a huge, 500-year event, and with the breach of the stop bank, yes, it's got grave concerns for the township of Edgecombe.
News as it's happening. Guy and Espiner and Susie Ferguson, morning reports, weekdays from 6.
Then on 9 to noon, a call for essentials for children going into foster care, many of whom have never owned a pair of pyjamas before. And after 10, goat rescuer Leanne Loricella, whose special needs baby goats have more than 400,000 followers on Instagram. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow, Northland to Manawatu, including Coromandel Bay of Plenty and the Central High Country. Showers gradually clearing from the south tomorrow and becoming fine. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay mainly fine, possible showers in southern Hawke's Bay today. Horowhenua to Wellington, Wairarapa, Nelson, Buller and Westland. Showers clearing in Westland this afternoon and elsewhere tonight and becoming mainly fine. Marlborough and Canterbury, rain with heavy falls, especially about Banks Peninsula, clearing overnight and becoming fine. Becoming cloudy again tomorrow afternoon. Southwest gales about the coast today, severe in exposed places about Banks Peninsula and Kaikoura Coast. Otago, Southland and Fiordland, cloudy periods with occasional rain in eastern Otago until this evening. A few showers developing tomorrow morning, clearing from this afternoon and from afternoon tomorrow. And the Chatham Islands, rain with some heavy falls, easing to showers late tomorrow. It's 5:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thanks, Katrina. We're going to keep an eye on this situation in Christchurch. In the last hour or so, the Heathcote River has burst its banks. We'll go there as soon as we know more. We don't think that at this stage property is threatened. Boy, it has been a wet old day over much of the country. In the Bay of Plenty, the rain was forecast. The Met Service had said it would be bad. And Edgecombe has had serious flooding before, but when the water came, it did so very fast that even a town that had been warned and knew what it could be like was caught out by the speed of the water and by how very much of it there was. Somewhere approaching 2,000 people had been evacuated from along the Rangitaiki River, from Edgecombe, from Te Teko, and from rural communities along that river and the Whakatane River too. Much of the Bay of Plenty town, just north and slightly inland from Whakatane, is still underwater. The Mayor will join us live shortly. And we've spoken to people whose homes are underwater, some for a second time. But first, our reporter Zach Fleming and our cameraman Bradley White are in Edgecombe. Zach, where are you coming to us live from?
John, I'm on the banks of the river, standing right next to the stop bank that collapsed and brought all of this water rushing into Edgecombe early this morning. For people who aren't familiar with Edgecombe, the stop bank is essentially just a small concrete wall that separates the river from the town. It stops all the river water flooding through. When that stop bank collapsed, that's essentially what happened. A torrent of water just came rushing into Edgecombe, and it's still happening now. I wouldn't even begin to try and guess how much water is rushing through, but I'm not sure if you can hear it. It sounds like a waterfall. If you stand right next to the stop bank, you have to yell at a person who's standing right next to you. Something that has really struck me standing here as well is the evidence of just how quickly people had to leave their homes. There are cars still in driveways, there's washing hanging on washing lines. Some people's front doors and windows are even still open. They actually had to just rush out of their home when the stop bank collapsed. Since we've been here this afternoon, the town is almost completely inaccessible. You have to go around houses on boats. There are surf life saving crews and just good sorts, locals with boats, who are going around the town trying to check that everyone has been evacuated properly.
Just a river coming down through the main street and right across the road. It was just crazy. Yeah, rubbish tins everywhere and guys screaming around in jet boats picking people up and cars stuck and yeah, just a mess.
Have you tried to help rescue anyone? Anyone need a rescuing?
We've run quite a few around and said, there's plenty of room at our place if they want to come and stay, but everybody seems to have been pretty well organised. They're all evacuated. It's just another thing for Edgecombe, isn't it?
Yeah. You're pretty chipper about it all, mate.
Well, what can you do? Yeah, you can't stop it, it's here.
I was standing on my back lawn talking to the neighbours, ready to hang out our washing, and that's where the hole we got to go, and seen it coming through our fence from behind, knock over the back fence, and away it came.
I mean, what was it like? Did it kind of come trickling through?
It just came trickling through, and then it sort of knocked down the fence, and then in she come.
And how much water?
It would have been, knee high within seconds.
And what were you thinking at this point?
I saved my dogs, get them inside, and then get my kids out.
And so what did you do after that?
After I got all the kids out, got the dogs in, then we got rescued. So then I jumped on the bandwagon and went and helped save a few of the old ladies up the road and got them on the truck, and away we went.
We were just looking outside, and it was just about ankle deep, and then it just really came through. Water was gushing through our neighbours, and we were all getting flooded out. It was pretty out of it. First time I seen one too. My first flood. Quite a few of us got out. It was cool because they had a truck with a trailer and carrying the old people out, so it was massive. Everyone helped out.
What were you thinking? What was going through your mind, man?
Just as long as everybody's all good, mainly, yeah. In my eyes, my family was all good, so that was all good. And all our neighbours were good too, because we got them all on the back of the truck.
By the time you got out, how high was the water?
Up to my guts.
Up to his guts. And Zach, you were crossing to us live. We can see you standing there. For people listening, it's impossible to see where the river ends and the world begins. There is just so much flooding, and it is so fast moving behind you. It is just torrential, and there is so much of it. So when will people even remotely be able to consider returning to their homes?
The people I spoke to today weren't exactly sure. Some of them have been told that they might be able to reassess tomorrow if they're on the outskirts. Other people, 2 days, 3 days. The people in the houses behind me that are under 2 or so metres of water probably aren't going to be coming back to their homes for a pretty long time, considering the stop bank is going to have to be completely repaired before they can obviously re-enter, because the water's just not going to stop otherwise.
Live, Zach Fleming live from the scene. The Mayor will join us shortly. Whilst there have been warnings, including from the Met Service on checkpoint last night, when the river burst its banks, it happened very, very quickly. Edgecombe has had a major flood before, of course, in 2004, and with a river running through it, it's built against flooding. But this was big and fast, and
It's really scary because it's right at its peak.
At Stretch, heavy automotive and machinery, they're beside the river, but on a corner that normally pushes the water away.
But yeah, it's coming up under the ground, as I see over just where the embankment is.
The rain was so heavy, the ground so wet that there was nowhere for the river to go but up.
We're up higher up above ground on a 2-storey, so we're just trying to get everything up there that we can get, and then just see what we can do after that.
So it's spilling up over the river, but it's coming up through the ground too, is it?
It is, yeah. Just as we're looking over, is that pipe coming through there, Kevin? Why it's coming up under the ground?
It's coming out of that pipe.
Oh, it's coming out of that pipe, which is off from the riverbank.
Right, so it's just stormwater overflowing, is it?
It's the stormwater overflowing.
Edgecombe is built to withstand flooding, but its defences simply weren't holding.
And there's a concrete wall that runs along College Road because the stop bank's quite narrow there, so it's a reinforced concrete wall. And that's about 100 metres long. And that broke away. And so all the water's heading off towards Matataway kind of thing. So it's going through all the houses on that side, heading towards Matatā, which is about 4 streets.
And when you say broke away, what did the water go round it, or did the concrete wall just break off?
Well, yeah, it was seeping under the wall, and apparently it just collapsed, yeah.
That was Tom. Like so many families, they'd evacuated. He's no idea what they're going back to. Schools were closed, of course, except for Thornton School down the river, where the principal, Shelley Bremner, was looking after children as their parents did what they could to save their belongings.
Well, we've got parents who live in Edgecombe, so they're evacuating Edgecombe at the moment. So we're just taking care of children while the parents can sort themselves out.
No need to involve little kids in the stress and risks of that.
So they're sitting here eating ice cream and eating toasted sandwiches.
Everyone near the centre of Edgecombe was getting out as fast as they could.
I just left straight away, to be honest, and am now out at my home, which is about 7 k's out from Edgecombe.
So you were at work, you were at Liquitech, were you?
Yes, I was at work, yeah, and the news came around the street that Edgecombe was being evacuated and for everybody to get out as quickly and safely as possible, so that's what we went ahead and did.
And so you didn't muck around, you just got the hell out of there?
Well, I didn't need to, because when I drove into work, I drove over the actual main entrance into Edgecombe, and you could see that the river was about to go over any side of the bank, take your pick pretty much. And so when they said it was going to go, we realised, well, yep, pretty serious, been through that once before. So got in the car and left.
Charlene left work for home, but it's a home that was effectively destroyed by flooding back in 2004. They stayed on the land and rebuilt. Well,
which is where I still live.
You lost your home in the flooding in 2004?
We did, yeah.
And you're back in the same place now?
Absolutely. Gorgeous place to live, if it's not flooding.
13 years on, having thought the new stop banks and all the work done since 2004 made them safer, she could do nothing more but pack, prepare to leave, and watch the river rise.
Most of our stuff's up off the floor. Dogs are sitting inside ready to get dragged into the car. Cats are in their cages. Yeah, that sort of stuff. Just the norm.
Just the norm?
Just the norm. What else are you going to do? It's Mother Nature. You can't change it.
You can't change it, but you can reflect on how bad it's become.
But yeah, no, it's not good. I don't know when I've seen the river higher.
How long have you been there for?
All my whole life, 84 years.
84 years, higher than in 2004, higher than Bryce can ever remember, beating all defences. So
Yep.
is it time to look at the stop banks there, just making them bigger and better?
That's been done. It's been done in the past. It's been done several times.
So what do? That's a very big question in Edgecombe now, but today there was one immediate answer. You go to higher grounds, like the golf club. So where were you?
We live in between Edgecombe and Te Tiko,
Not on the river.
right by the river.
Rangi and her family were more evacuees, waiting it out, waiting to see what had happened.
And just see how bad it actually is and if we're allowed to go back into our homes. But
I hope you're going to be okay.
oh, we'll be fine, yeah. We've had a few natural disasters here before and we always seem to bounce back, so we'll be fine.
Earthquakes, floods.
Oh, yeah.
It takes a strong person to face like that kind of flooding, the loss perhaps of a home and much of a town. Edgecombe is a river town.
Yeah, well, the river runs almost literally down the side of the town. The town's literally built right next to the river. I mean, we walk along the river every night with our dogs and things.
That's Charlene again, who loves it there and won't be leaving, despite 2004, despite 2017. She'll stay, wait it out, tidy up, and start again.
What else do you do?
Charlene, joining us now from Whakatane is the region's Mayor, Tony Bond. Tony, great to have you with us. What's the latest? What's are the floodwaters going up, down? What's happening?
They're not going down there yet, John. It's actually still quite a serious situation. We've stop banks on the Rangitaiki River are very fragile at the moment. So therefore, we are still getting people away from the danger areas. The whole of Edgecombe we have just about evacuated now. So the final few people have been asked to leave. And then we've got a few other settlements along the river that if where they feel that the stop banks are fragile, we're going to ask them to move out.
And what settlements are they? Is that Thornton and Te Teko? What are we talking about here?
Yeah, it's Thornton.
Okay.
So we've got...
Yeah, which is nearer the sea, right? So that would have been hit by the tide when it came in about 3 o'clock?
Yeah, we've got the stop banks along that river that have been monitored all the time. We've got a 300-year event here, and it's putting pressure on all of the stop banks. So the danger breach, we've had an intentional breach south of the town to try and make sure that we can actually take the pressure off.
Sorry, can you explain that to me? South of Edgecombe, did you have an intentional breach? How did you make that work?
Well, there was a spillway there designed to take the pressure. When the river got up to a certain level, it wasn't going fast enough, so they've actually made the breach bigger to take the pressure off where the water is pouring into Edgecombe.
Wow, and you've basically evacuated everyone in the town now, have you? Basically the whole town is out.
Yes, and it's been a very professional operation today, managed by the police, and we had local agricultural contractors with their vehicles, jet boats, and a huge contingent of New Zealand Fire Service. So,
yeah, and volunteers. We're about to speak to one of them. Were you caught out by this? It happened very, very suddenly. Was it much bigger than anyone thought it was going to be?
Correct. This morning on Radio New Zealand, I actually told everybody that we're fairly secure. We think we've got through the worst of it. I went home for a cup of tea and some breakfast, and within minutes, the whole thing changed.
And so when you said, and I actually heard you saying that, when you said that you felt reasonably relaxed, that's not quite the right word, but where was that information coming from?
It was coming from, we had our emergency centre here open all night. It was mainly the rain had stopped, and so we felt that the rain stopped. We got through the 2:30 high tide. The next high tide wasn't until 3 p.m, and we thought, right, that's going to be the next pressure point at 3 p.m.
It's a hell of a river, isn't it? Because it flows from up in the highlands, and the Matahina Dam is not far up. You don't have to drive far to get to the dam from Edgecombe. Was that used as effectively as it could have been as a form of flood control?
We believe so, but the question will be asked as soon as this is all over. We want to make sure that things have been done correctly. And of course, at any disaster, you have people stating other things. So determined to make sure that we get to the bottom of it and work with regional councils to make sure things are done.
The bottom of what? What is the stuff that's troubling you at the moment?
Oh, I'm not really troubled. I think it's handled very carefully. But there are some people saying that we could have held more water back or released water before the event. But this was being monitored right through. So I was very comfortable right up till the time. And you've got to remember, it wasn't the bank was breached. It wasn't actually overtopped. So basically the bank collapsed.
How much damage is there, do you reckon? I mean, you've evacuated an entire town, and the CBD, as we know, and it's a small little community, permanent population of about 1,600 in the central part of Edgecombe town itself. Is water basically through just about every home and business there?
The water's through about a good 1/3, if not nearly half of the town, and the other half is dry, but that's where we've got to be very careful, because if the bank doesn't hold, then they'll be in immediate danger.
Right.
This happened quickly. I know one policeman saw the bank was ready to go. He ran and warned people, but this gentleman got his first vehicle out. As he was driving down with his vehicle, he looked in the rear vision mirror and just saw the wall of water going towards his home.
Yeah, it's extraordinary.
Yeah, and then another one. A guy woke up this morning after a night shift and thought, hello, I think I've got water in my bedroom. And sure enough, his phone was floating. So he was pretty shocked and woke up quickly.
And Edgecombe had big flooding in 2004. You built stop banks. Everyone knows how the flooding works. This is not a town that's going to be caught out by flooding unless it's exceptional. But I'm really interested in where the problematic water came from. Was it raining very heavily directly above Edgecombe, or was it running down the river from the hills?
It's the bulk of this weather bomb, and it was a weather bomb that has happened in the hill country mainly. And that's where, right now we've got a rescue team going up to between Murupara and Ruatahuna, because we have identified about 30 people still trapped in vehicles on the road up to Ruatahuna. There's been so many slips, and his communication has been so hard. So it just shows you that it was a major weather bomb further up, and it takes a little bit of time for water to come down.
Mayor Tony Bond, thank you so much for joining us with the latest. So evacuation's still taking place, and people now looking up the river into the hills for anyone who needs to be saved, removed from their property, or just simply checked up on. Tautini Hahipeni's mother-in-law lives in Edgecombe. He's in Whakatane himself. When he heard she was trapped in her house, surrounded by rising floodwaters, he borrowed a ute and went to get her. But as he was driving in, he was hit by a wall of water that threatened to swamp even the ute. So he went back to high ground, where he came across a large truck and trailer unit, and he and the driver went back in. They went to rescue one elderly woman, and incredibly, they ended up getting roughly 24 people out.
Then he said, we've got everyone. He says, no, you haven't. My mother-in-law's still in there, and I think the neighbour is as well. So we went back. And we just got to my mother-in-law's, and I had to struggle to get up the driveway. It was quite a torrent. So another work colleague, he gave me a hand to get her onto the truck. So we had to like tiptoe almost, like little steps. So we got her on the trailer, and there was other people, and they were all waving out and come and get my baby. So we had to go and get them, and and probably spent a good 2 hours there rescuing people, and. We had to go and grab another guy, Paul McConaughey. He was in the wheelchair.
So wait a sec. Paul McConaughey was in a wheelchair, completely surrounded by flooding.
Yep, all around the house. It was the inside the house. The whole house was the carpet was just covered with water. So it was a bit splashy inside, but it was getting higher. So. And I said, well, we're going to have to take you in your wheelchair. So we tried in a wheelchair. We nearly tipped him out. So he says, okay, we're going to have to carry you, because he had he had half his leg chopped off. So we carried him onto the trailer, put him on there, and we came back, grabbed his wheelchair, and his wife, and so we left him there. Went up the road and grabbed Nettie, and she's no little lady. So we had 5 of us. Tiptoeing her, or just slowly inching across her driveway, and we had to ask everyone, what have we got here? Have we got grass? Are there plants? Is there holes, or are there stumps? So
because you couldn't see what you were standing on, so
the water was dirty. The water was dirty.
So the water was deep and dirty, and you were carrying someone through it, and you had no idea what you were stepping onto next.
No, we couldn't carry her because she would be over about 160 kgs.
Holy moly! So how were you getting her through there?
4 of us had to hold on. 4 or 5 of us were holding on to her. The husband had all her bags and everything, and he was right behind us. And so we had to get her across the driveway and get her close to the fence. Then we can all hold on to the fence, and then we had to go down the fence where there was no, because there was a torrent going through about at least half a dozen houses.
So you took out how many people in total?
There was about, let me see, well, I did have a count of 30, but people were getting off and on and off and going getting things, and we're telling them, what the hell are you doing? Stay on here, and so we tried our best to keep them on, and here we go, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and there's 15, I've got a photo of everyone, 15, but there was another 10 more further down, but I didn't take photos because at the time, so while I'm doing this, I'm taking shots of everything and videos.
And so this includes a lady who's about 160 kilos who you just simply couldn't carry.
Oh, no, there's no way we could carry her. It would have been dangerous to carry her.
A man in a wheelchair?
Yep.
Some elderly people, including your mother-in-law?
Yes, and and my mother-in-law's dog. And that was the only dog that was allowed on the truck, though.
I think that's a good thing to do with your mother-in-law, isn't it? Forgive me for making a mother-in-law joke. It's totally unacceptable. And a baby? Did you take a baby out?
Oh, there's a few babies. Yep, there's a few kiddies. One young baby. But one of the other guys, I dragged them off the trailer and says, "Come on, you got to come and help. Got to come and help these people." So there's about 1, 2, 3. There's about maybe 5 or 6 kids on there, and then the fire brigade turned up with a big harvester tractor and took all the kids off the trailer because it was getting higher and higher. So they took them off, and then we went and grabbed some more people.
And where are they now? All the people you rescued on Toe's Ark. Where are they?
Edgecombe War Memorial Hall or the Edgecombe Fire Brigade.
Having a cup of tea.
Oh yeah, they're having a cup of tea, and residents of the Tekau have gone in and helped out over at Edgecombe, so given them something to eat, and so everyone's just going to sit back and wait, nice and cuddly and warm, and cup of tea and everything. And
hope you're feeling proud of yourself, Toe.
Oh, it's the day off work, eh?
Tautuni Hahipeni, who went in with a mate and a truck with a trailer on the back. You must see the pictures, they are on the website. Meanwhile, there are some people still at home in Edgecombe. As floodwaters surround their home, Hikitea Tutua says her family has decided to stay put as their home is elevated a metre off the ground.
We are surrounded because we have another big canal that runs right alongside our property, and so we're getting water from there and all the neighbouring farms.
And so there's just water everywhere, is there?
Yes, there is. We're our own little island.
And how long have you lived there for?
We've lived here for 10 years now.
And have you ever seen anything like this?
Not this bad, no. Our first year it was pretty bad, but not this bad.
Right, and everyone is saying, Hekatea, and you know this, that you should be evacuating, but you're not. Why not?
Because our house is a metre above the water, our house is all fine. We've still got power, and it's easier for us to stay here than try and make our way to roads and things. And they're all telling us the water's receding, so there's nothing much else we can do. So we've still got power, and we're still able to, nothing's in the house, so it's not affecting us that way.
So are you standing at a window now?
Yes, I am.
Can you describe what you can see out there? What are you looking towards? Which way are you looking?
I am probably looking towards the main road. So if it runs from Edgecombe to Marata, I'm looking at that, and it's water. It's just water.
There's nothing but water?
Yeah, nothing but water. Oh, and fence posts and trees, and some stock that have found some kind of high ground.
Right, so the stock's in trouble. They've obviously, they're standing in water, a lot of them, are they?
Yes, they are. We've managed to move our stock onto neighbouring farms and others right onto stop banks. So we've been helping neighbours move theirs onto stop banks so that they're kind of out of water.
And how deep is the water on the road?
On the road, it's my husband's Hilux, his 4x4, it's up above the boards, so the side boards, the walking boards.
Right, so if you've just got an ordinary family car or whatever, you aren't driving out of there, are you?
No, my husband's car's under water. It's up to his car seats in his car.
Holy moly. And I can hear wind, right? Is it quite windy there now?
Yes, it has. It's just picked up.
Which may help dry the paddocks, I guess. Is it raining?
No rain yet, which is good, but it's not looking great at the moment. It's starting to kind of cloud over. So, we're hoping it doesn't rain, and they're assuring us it's not going to.
Well, if it gets any worse, you'll sail out.
My husband's got a boat, so we've been kind of kayaking around on his kayak. So that's just to kind of get to places and see how far the water's going down. And help people rescue stock. Have you been getting about in a boat to do that? Just on his kayak. Yeah. Yeah. Nuts, man. And who have you got there with you? So me and my husband and I and our 4 kids and my mum and dad they kayak down to us.
Coming up on Checkpoint, more from Edgecombe and on weather from around the country. The Heathcote is getting up to no good in Christchurch. We'll go there. We have the rest of the day's news. The Disabilities Minister lashes out at an IHC-run service for autistic people, accusing it of cancelling its services with no notice. And a spokesperson from the Assembly of God church congregation asked why many members of the congregation have still not been offered a test for typhoid or spoken to by public health officials. We'd love to hear from you in any way you choose. You text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, and you can email us checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. Nona next with business news, but historically late. Here is Katrina Batten with the 5:30 headlines.
Almost all of Edgecombe's 1,600 residents have been evacuated after the Rangataiki River burst its banks. Jet boats and Defence Force unimogs were used to rescue people and pets as water flooded into the Bay of Plenty town, turning the streets into rivers. An Edgecombe woman, Patiraki, described the river breaching its banks and gushing into the town. She said she first saw water coming through tiny holes in the bottom of the stop bank before it exploded into the streets. The Transport Agency says it's confident there will be access to Kaikoura tomorrow after the town was cut off for most of the day. The inland route was closed by bad weather last night and only reopened for 3 hours today. Mud and rock slides have closed State Highway 1 south of the town since Tuesday, but the agency says drivers should have access tomorrow via the inland road. The government is warning that terrorists could target Anzac Day commemorations on the Gallipoli Peninsula. The Foreign Minister, Murray McCulley, says travel advice for Turkey has been updated in response to information suggesting terrorists may try to target the Anzac Day events. Mr McCulley says as well as advising against all tourist and other non-essential travel to Ankara and Istanbul, the government recommends caution in Gallipoli and elsewhere in Turkey. An Auckland Medical Officer of Health says there are 2 to 3 new cases of typhoid being notified there each day. The Auckland Regional Public Health Service says there are now 18 confirmed cases of the illness, 1 probable case and 2 under investigation. That's up from 16 confirmed and 2 probable cases yesterday. The Central Otago Lakes region has topped Auckland as the least affordable place in the country to buy a house. The Massey University Home Affordability Report shows Central Otago Lakes home affordability fell by 8.2% in the quarter. The region's median house prices are almost 14 times higher than annual wages. Those are the headlines. I'll be back at 6.
Thanks, Katrina. Lots ahead, including more on that typhoid story, and we're going live to Christchurch. But let's turn to business news now with Nona Peltier. Shell Oil has taken another step towards quitting the country, Nona. What's it done?
Right. Well, they've been talking about this for a while. They sold their petrol stations some years back to Z Energy. Now they've sold, well, they signaled earlier that they were looking at getting out of the country's, their assets. And so they've basically sold their half stake in the Kapuni field to their partner, Todd Energy. And in turn, Todd Energy has exited their, they had another joint venture called Shell Todd Energy Services. So Shell has taken over that share. So that sort of tidied up the balance sheet, so to speak. So yeah, they're still working on it. They're looking at getting rid of some of their other assets. They do still have some stakes in the Maui and Pohokura fields, and they also have some exploration permits.
No information about what was paid, what they received?
No, they are not disclosing any of that. So it's all very tidy and quiet.
Although everyone knew they were a seller, so that puts them in a position of weakness, doesn't it?
Sure. Well, yes, but on the other hand, I mean, there's a lot of people out there looking for assets, so there's competition for them too.
Right.
So there's that. I mean, it's not like there's no buyers.
No.
There's plenty of cash-rich folks around looking around for things. So we'll see what happens with that. Yeah.
Fascinating. So Shell leaving.
Yeah.
What else happened today?
Well, I don't know if we have very much time because we've got such a full slate of news, but Z Energy has bowed to pressure from shareholders and decided to hold a real annual meeting in a physical location.
We talked about this. They were going to have a virtual annual meeting,
That's right. No.
So you could tune in via the internet.
Yeah, that's right.
But people want a sausage roll.
They
want to turn up
want
and
that sausage roll, so it's going to happen.
Those horrible cups of tea that stews away for hours.
Oh, there you go. Well, I don't know about that, but... Okay. Anyways, the NZ Top 50 Index ended the day up 0.33%, 25 points to 7,290. The New Zealand dollar is steady there, just ahead of the meeting of the presidents, the Chinese and the U.S. presidents later Thursday. 69.7 US cents, 92.5 Australian, and 55.8 pence.
Nona Peltier, our Auckland business reporter, here in the studio with me. Thanks so much, Nona. It's coming up to 20.5 to 6. The Disabilities Minister has lashed out at an IHC-run service for autistic people, accusing it of cancelling its services with no notice and abandoning its vulnerable clients. IDEA Service will be cutting some of its family support services from the end of the month. But it says it's been making it clear for months it could not continue with its existing funding levels. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
IDEA Services has worked with about 3,000 families to help parents better understand and work with their autistic children, a service that will no longer be available. Its other contracts providing supported living and vocational support will continue. In a question to the Minister Nikki Wagner, the Labour MP Porter Williams quoted a letter IDEA Services sent to parents 2 days ago.
Underfunding of over $500,000 in the 2016-2017 year and no offer of increase for the coming year means they cannot continue to provide services and have been unable to renew the contract with the Ministry of Health." End quote.
But the Minister hit back.
I am incredibly disappointed that an organisation like IDEA Services that says it cares for our vulnerable, disabled people has been so irresponsible as to cut services without notice. I have been advised by the Ministry of Health that they were only informed that IDEA Services did not intend to renew their contract last week after previously indicating that they would.
And she said they gave no notice to their clients.
And what's worse, IDEA Services refused to agree to a temporary 3-month contract to allow arrangements to be made to look after their clients.
Porter Williams read out some responses from affected families.
What does the Minister say to Diana, whose daughter waited 18 months for a social skills course that has now been cut? Or Francesca, who has 2 autistic children and says that before IDEA Services help came along 2 years ago, they were in crisis?
I say that IDEA Services is being totally irresponsible. We all know that change can be difficult for some people and their families, and particularly for this cohort of clients for whom routine and security is so important.
The General Manager for IHC, Gina Rogers, says the Minister has not been told the full story.
Clearly the Minister has been misinformed around this. We've been discussing this particular contract for 6 months, and in fact we've been asking to see the contract for 3. The issue with it is that we feared it would come in at a price that we couldn't manage, and it came in late last week and our fears were realised. We've been telling them for months that we've been running this contract at a loss for 3 years and we just couldn't continue.
The Minister Nikki Wagner also earned the ire of the Speaker after failing to correct an inaccurate statement about IDEA Services funding she had made last month quickly enough. The Speaker, David Carter, told the House it was up to the Labour Party whether it pursues a contempt of Parliament complaint against her. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Jane Patterson.
Since news first broke on Tuesday that a woman had died with typhoid, there have been many interviews about, but not with, the congregation of the church she attended. We've been told the church was approached by public health representatives and the pastor asked for space to conduct a funeral and to allow people to grieve. Now, the woman died 2 Tuesdays ago and her funeral was on Monday. So what have the congregation now been told about a public health emergency which has seen 17 people contract typhoid, all from or connected to the same church? And we believe that number is growing. Tina is a senior member of the congregation speaking on its behalf. Jerome Mika is the family spokesperson. They both joined us in the studio earlier this afternoon. Tina was with the deceased woman twice in the 3 days prior to her death. I asked her, first of all, if she's been tested for typhoid.
No, I haven't to this day.
And when did you last see your friend who died of typhoid?
I last saw her on Tuesday last week before she died. I got to the hospital around about 8 o'clock in the morning, or just before 8, when I received the message that she only had a couple of hours to live.
And you prayed with her and you sat with her?
Yeah, I spent probably a good 20 minutes with her. I was actually right close up with her, just talking to her and checking to see how she was.
Holding her hand, that kind of
yes, thing? Yes, and just encouraging her to, get her, don't worry about anything else, just focus on getting better. And then I just did a prayer with her.
And incredibly to me, this was on Tuesday and she had been at church on Sunday.
That's correct.
So 3 days earlier.
That's right.
And did you see her at church?
I was with her and we had a performance on that Sunday and she was standing next to me.
When you say performance, you sang together, did you?
Yes, we had a performance in songs on that Sunday and she was standing with me.
And how many people were at that church service?
I would say probably more than 400 or 500 people that Sunday morning. It was a Sunday morning.
So your friend was visited in the hospital. She was amongst hundreds of people at church. Have the public health authorities been to your congregation, called a special meeting, addressed them about the risks of typhoid, talked to people about their exposure to your friend? Has any of that kind of stuff taken place that you're aware of?
No, there's no meeting. We've never had any meetings held with the public health authorities. I only received a phone call from them asking questions about members of my family who go to church.
Have you been tested yet?
I have not been tested yet.
And so you sang beside your friend on Sunday and you went to see her just before she died on Tuesday?
That's right.
And you still haven't been tested?
No.
And when did you find out she had typhoid?
When the news media came out yesterday.
Tuesday.
Tuesday.
When the news. So you found out through the news media on Tuesday.
That's right.
No one had told you prior to that.
No.
And since then you've been food handling, cooking food, preparing food, being with your family, all of that kind of stuff.
That's correct.
This is so confusing because we've been told the family has been spoken to, that the minister was spoken to, I think, 3 times, that he asked for space to conduct the funeral in before the discussions around typhoid took place, and they're such different versions of events that we're hearing. And what we can say, explicitly statement of fact, is that 17 people have typhoid, including, of course, the deceased, and that they are all from or connected to the same congregation. So, a simple question, has the congregation been spoken to, Jerome Mika?
Yeah, no, they haven't. And this is also, we saw the Minister of Health saying that the CEO has have apologised to them, but we have had no apology to the church or to the family. And this is probably what's hurting for the family, is even the contact. It feels really sort of disingenuous, and they're not coming to try and help them to test them and look at an infection of typhoid. They're actually just trying to look at ways to minimise and cover things up. And I think this is why we're really disappointed. We'd like to have some discussions with people, but even when I rang on the Tuesday after the media, I got sort of pushed to the side. We tried to ring the Pacific liaison person. No one was answering our calls, so it's just been really, really hard for them. And it's also still very raw for the family because they've just buried their loved one on Monday, and now they're having to go through this roller coaster ride of all this information being filtered out without some facts being established first.
Right. Your friend died 2 Tuesdays ago, so roughly 9 days ago, right? And your friend was a regular member of your congregation, right?
That's correct.
So did public health people attend your church on Sunday?
No, they didn't.
So they didn't, because that would have been the best place to get to as many of the congregation as you possibly could at one time.
That's correct.
So no one came?
Nobody came.
And by this stage you didn't know she had typhoid?
No, I did not know she had typhoid.
And you found out through the media?
That's correct.
What do you think of this, Jerome Mika?
I just think that they need to apply some honesty and really come and talk to the church and also to the family, because we've tried to connect with them. I did have some discussions with people this morning to try and find the best way forward together. But at this stage, the family is still trying to understand, and even the church, on how, if it was about genuine engagement and connection with them to try and test everyone and ensure that they weren't infected by typhoid, then that's great. But it seems like a bit of a PR exercise to minimise what's happened. And we just, like I said, instead of just apologising to the Minister of Health, please front to the church and the family and apologise to them, because that's the least they can do before we can move forward together, because things are starting to, not only they have to mourn their loved one, but now they have to also deal with everything that's been going on, and it's for some it's quite overwhelming. And I do really appreciate, hence why I've spoken on behalf of the family of the church, because it is about protecting them and giving them some time to mourn. And this is why we've wanted to come to talk to you this afternoon, because it's important to get out the truth rather than the spin that we've been seeing by some of the things that have come out.
That's Jerome Mika and Tina speaking on behalf of the family and the congregation. All 17 of the people infected so far with typhoid are either from or connected to that church congregation. Obviously, we've heard from public health authorities last night and the night before. We haven't heard on Checkpoint from the Minister. We want to know what he's been told, what his sense of what people have been told is, but he declined our invitation to appear on the program tonight, saying he had another engagement. The time is 10 minutes to 6. The Minister, by the way, is Health Minister Jonathan Coleman. Syria and Russia are denying responsibility, but Western powers are in no doubt whatsoever that the Syrian government carried out this week's deadly chemical gas attack on a rebel-held town in the country's north. Even the US President Donald Trump has said pictures of the victims have changed his attitude towards the Syrian regime and its leader, Bashar al-Assad. At an emergency session of the UN Security Council, there was heated debate. Of course, every time they go to impose some kind of sanctions, Russia vetoes it. But in the town itself, where the residents are mourning their dead and the smell of poison gas still fills the air, the talking and the politics are a world away. The BBC's Nick Bryant with this report.
5-year-old Ibrahim went to bed in his Spider-Man pyjamas and woke up to the latest horror in Syria's unending war. His grandmother was at his hospital bedside, caring for Ibrahim and his sister Teba because their father was killed in the attack. Lives ended, lives ruined by a toxic cloud that filled victims' lungs with poison.
My grandchildren were sleeping. Everyone woke up to a loud noise. They went outside, and that's when they came across the chemical attack. They just fell to the floor and died.
It's all too easy to become desensitized to the suffering of the Syrian people, but consider the plight of Abdul Hamid al-Yusuf. He lost 20 members of his family, including his twin children, killed in a second explosion.
I left Ahmed and Aya in good health. Why did this happen? I went to help other people and thought my children were okay. Now they are gone.
Yesterday, Donald Trump derided his predecessor, Barack Obama, for warning the Assad regime that using chemical weapons crossed a red line, but not following through on that threat. But today, in the fragrant setting of the Rose Garden, he deployed similar language himself and signalled a change in thinking on Syria.
These heinous actions by the Assad regime cannot be tolerated. My attitude toward Syria and Assad has changed very much. It crossed a lot of lines for me.
In an angry emergency session at the United Nations Security Council, Western nations pointed the finger of blame at the Assad regime and also its diplomatic protectors here, Russia. But Moscow claimed that Syrian rebels were to blame for the deaths.
The Syrian Air Force conducted an airstrike on the eastern edge of Khan Sheikhoun on a large warehouse of ammunition and military equipment. On the territory of that warehouse, there was a facility to produce ammunition with the use of toxic weapons.
But that prompted this electrifying moment of diplomatic theatre. The US ambassador, Nikki Haley, getting to her feet and holding up graphic images of the dead. Then, eyeballing her Russian counterpart, she blasted Moscow.
If Russia has the influence in Syria that it claims to have, we need to see them use it. We need to see them put an end to these horrific acts. How many more children have to die before Russia cares?
Today we saw the usual divisions at the Security Council, the usual deadlock over Syria, and the usual inability of the international community even to agree about basic facts on the ground.
This is the deadliest attack in Syria in nearly 4 years, and after that atrocity in 2013, the Assad regime was supposed to have handed over its chemical weapons stockpile. But it's continued to use banned toxic weapons, and experts believe the evidence points to Damascus having carried out another war crime.
That report from Nick Bryant, the BBC's Nick Bryant, of course, just updating some of the flooding in Christchurch. It is surface flooding, quite heavy. And impressive and very splash-making surface flooding in some areas. But as far as we are aware, there are no properties directly threatened. We will update you if we hear any more on that surface flooding, and quite a lot of it in Christchurch, but no properties as far as we are aware under threat. Let's go to Central Otago now, which has overtaken Auckland as the least affordable region in the country to buy a house, full stop. The latest Massey University Home Affordability report shows median house prices are now 14 times, almost 14 times, annual wages for the southern region. Otago Southland reporter Lydia Anderson has more.
There's a big list of reasons cited for the Central Otago Lakes area becoming the least affordable region to purchase a house. Tourism industry demand, a shortage of houses, a trend of so-called high-end lifestyle living, speculative investment, release of capital from elsewhere in the country and stagnant wage increases. Central Otago Mayor Tim Cadogan says the Massey University report for the December-February quarter is sobering. He says high Queenstown house prices have pushed up demand for property in Cromwell and Alexandra.
I own a house in Central Otago, so this is probably what you might think is good news. But if you're working on a minimum wage, and a lot of people are in this area, how on earth are you going to get to buy your own home? How are you going to attain that New Zealand dream? We've got to have a hand in that, I believe.
Mr Cadogan has set up a working party to look at how to establish a trust to generate more affordable housing in Cromwell, where the biggest pressures are. He says demand for Central Otago property is coming from far and wide.
So we're seeing people that are selling up from the North Island and, buying a puffer jacket and coming down with a whole lot of money left to spare or to spend. We're also having quite a few people coming back from the mines in Australia, so that industry's having a slip. And Central Otago, with its heavy construction history, a lot of young ones did go to Australia, make their money, and now they're coming back.
The Massey Home Affordability Index measures house prices, interest rates and wages. It shows Central Otago Lakes home affordability decreased by just over 8% in the last quarter, and the region is now 68% less affordable than the rest of New Zealand. Queenstown Lakes Community Housing Trust Executive Officer Julie Scott says she's not surprised.
It's pretty horrific to see those numbers, and it's also indicative of the fact that wages aren't growing in this district. Wages are really low in this district. That may be something else that employers need to look at, is increasing wages to retain good staff and make it a bit easier for them to get into a property.
Ms Scott says the Trust has 430 households on its waiting list for affordable accommodation in Queenstown. But while it's bad news for Central Otago Lakes, it's better news for would-be home buyers in Auckland, where the median house price dropped by almost $52,000 in the quarter to $800,000 in February. It's still 55% less affordable than the rest of the country. The Massey report's author, Associate Professor Graham Squires, says it's too early to tell if Auckland house prices are really dropping.
It's not dramatic, and that's when a lot of the commentators at the moment are sort of looking at the quarterly figures and thinking about these price changes, particularly the Auckland change in terms of it slowing down, and thinking about, well, is this just a blip in the cycle, and will we just return to an upswing again in the second quarter?
Associate Professor Squires says Central Otago Lakes was the most unaffordable region between the decade to 2013, when Auckland took over the top slot. Out of the 12 regions measured, Southland takes the prize for the most affordable place to buy a house, sitting at 46% of the national average. In Dunedin for Checkpoint, Lydia Anderson.
You're with Checkpoint on RNZ, about a minute and a half before 6. Getting fascinating feedback on the Matahina Dam. Now, if you don't know the Rangataiki River, it doesn't go far upstream. It goes through Edgecombe and then Te Teko, and then not far up to a dam. And quite a few people contacting us about the flows from the dam in the 12, 18, 24 hours prior to the flooding in Edgecombe and around Edgecombe this morning. Basically, the whole town of Edgecombe has now been evacuated. So we're going to make some calls on this. We haven't been able to clarify any of this, and we are looking now at the dam reports. But the feedback we are receiving from people, including Mark, says, and I quote, the attached graph of flow down the Rangataiki shows Trustpower dropped the Matahina Dam flow downstream to Edgecombe at 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. on the morning of the flood. I question why Trustpower did not take the precautionary approach and the possibility that the BOP was going to get some of the rain forecast for the Waikato and start releasing water several hours earlier, or not save the 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. water shown on the graph. So we're going to make calls about that and try and find out what's gone on with the Matahina. And they could have done more to release water earlier. Other feedback, people asking where Jerry Brownlee is, the Civil Defence Minister. Well, wherever you find him, it won't be on checkpoint because he doesn't talk to us under any circumstances. It's 6 o'clock.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui, good evening, ko Katrina Batanaho. The danger is not over for Edgecombe residents, with warnings that more homes could yet be flooded. Almost the entire town of 1,600 people has been evacuated after the Rangataiki River burst its banks this morning. People had to scramble to get away as water rushed through a stop bank. The Whakatane District Mayor Tony Bond told John Campbell on Checkpoint that the emergency is far from over and other parts of the town are not out of the woods yet.
The water's through about a good 1/3, if not nearly half of the town, and the other half is dry, but that's where we've got to be very careful, because if the bank doesn't hold, then they'll be in immediate danger. Right. So this happened quickly.
Tony Bond says a rescue team is currently on its way inland to between Murupara and Ruatahuna, where about 30 people are trapped in vehicles due to slips. He also says questions will be asked over whether the Matahina Dam above Edgecombe was managed properly before and during the heavy rain. One man says the dam should have been emptied sooner to avoid the flooding. Graham Burke, who's lived with his wife Gail on Puriri Crescent in Edgecombe for 43 years, says they've probably lost everything. Mr Burke says he was standing 50 metres from the riverbank when the water broke through. He says the dam, which is owned by Trustpower, should have been emptied out weeks ago.
People are really brassed off. There'll be a public meeting and there'll be just about a hanging, and it's Trustpower are responsible for the dam. So if they had emptied the dam, there would be no flood.
Mr Burke says his home, along with 400 others, will be a mess and will probably need a total rebuild. An Edgecombe woman has described the moments the river breached its banks and gushed into the town. Patiraki told reporter Sharon Brett Kelly she first saw water coming through tiny holes in the bottom of the stop bank before it exploded into the streets.
Water and then we were told to get out.
Who told you to get out?
All the fire brigade guys. They were just worried about us because we were just getting things out of the homes over there.
Patiraki says the water is up to the floorboards in her home. 30 people who were stranded in the remote Bay of Plenty community of Minganui are being airlifted to Rangatahi Marae. Another 15 people reported to be stranded in Minganui are staying the night at the local school. The government is warning that terrorists could target Anzac Day commemorations on the Gallipoli Peninsula. New Zealand has today updated its travel advice for Turkey, has our Deputy Political Editor Chris Bramwell.
The Foreign Minister, Murray McCully, says the travel advice change reflects information received suggesting terrorists may seek to target the Anzac Day events at Gallipoli. Mr McCully says the government continues to advise against all tourist and other non-essential travel to Ankara and Istanbul and recommends caution in Gallipoli and elsewhere in Turkey due to the heightened threat of terrorism and potential for civil unrest. Mr McCully says all New Zealanders travelling to Gallipoli should register on the Safe Travel website and monitor travel advice, which will be kept under review in the lead-up to the event. Atuiti whare pārimata ko Chris Bramwell aho.
A close friend of a woman who died of typhoid last week is calling on health authorities to meet with the church and respond to their concerns. The woman died last Tuesday, and there are 18 other confirmed cases of typhoid in Auckland, all from the same Samoan church. Tina, who attends the church, was at the woman's side in hospital before she died. She says she hasn't been tested for the disease and church members have been left in the dark.
We don't know how many people are affected or how many haven't been tested, or we have no information as to How do we care for those who've just come out of hospital?
Tina says health authorities just need to call a meeting with church members to provide information and answer questions. The Education Minister, Hehia Parata, says schools should call the police if they cannot safely manage violent students. Northland principals have said they might start to suspend violent children until they get more funding to properly support them. In Parliament today, Ms Parata has agreed with ministry advice to call the police.
Schools across the country should call the police in situations when a student cannot be managed safely and the imminent danger to students, staff or themselves remains after all alternatives have been explored. As we expect in all situations, the police are the most appropriate people to deal with violence.
Hehia Parata says Northland schools receive more special education grants per child than any other region. It's 6:05. To sport, and it's been 8 months since the All Blacks midfielder Sonny Bill Williams last played a game of rugby, but coach Tana Umanga says he's still fitter than the majority of his Blues counterparts. Williams will make his Blues debut from off the bench in this Saturday's Super Rugby match against the Highlanders in Dunedin, his first game since rupturing his Achilles at the Rio Olympics in August. Umanga says the 31-year-old has put in the hard yards to get back onto the rugby field, so much so that he struggles to keep his shirt on at training.
You just get used to seeing him with his shirt off and he looks good, so, it's just another day for us. Everyone understands that, to keep the shirt on around him and things like that.
Tana Umanga. 3 times Masters winner American golfer Phil Mickelson feels he's better prepared than most to handle the bad weather expected for the first couple of days of the tournament. The threat of a tornado stopped practice at the par 3 competition today, and strong winds and cool temperatures are forecast for the first 2 rounds. Mickelson, who'll tee up for the 25th time at Augusta National, feels bad weather is good news for him.
Thursday, Friday, the weather's going to come in, and that's going to magnify the misses for a lot of players, which means that you need to miss it in the correct spots. Even though you might miss it big, if you're in the right spot, you can take advantage of your short game and salvage a lot of pars. And I hope to rely on that knowledge and skill to keep myself in it heading into the weekend.
Phil Mickelson. Meanwhile, the world #1 Dustin Johnson is in doubt for the tournament after landing heavily on his back following a fall at his Augusta rental property. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Wes van der Linde talks about growing up gay in a devoutly Christian household. He's still gay and he's still a Christian. Our changing world goes bush with one of this country's rarest seabirds. While this week's cultural ambassador Chris Janidis celebrates the latest work from Kiwi choreographer Michael Parmenter. In fact, if we're lucky, you'll have Michael with him. On Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Met service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Manawatu, including Coromandel Bay of plenty in the central high country. Showers gradually clearing from the south tomorrow and becoming fine. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay mainly fine. Possible showers in southern Hawke's Bay today. Horowhenua to Wellington, Wairarapa, Nelson, Buller and Westland. Showers clearing in Westland this afternoon and elsewhere tonight and becoming mainly fine. Marlborough and Canterbury, rain with heavy falls, especially about the Banks Peninsula, clearing overnight and becoming fine. Becoming cloudy again tomorrow afternoon. Southwest gales about the coast today, severe in exposed places about Banks Peninsula and Kaikoura Coast. Otago, Southland and Fiordland, cloudy periods with occasional rain in eastern Otago until this evening. A few showers developing tomorrow morning, clearing from afternoon. The Chatham Islands, rain with some heavy falls, easing to showers late tomorrow. It's 6:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thanks, Katrina. One thing before we move on, the Matahina Dam and what was going on there. We're desperate to talk to someone from Trustpower about the water that was and wasn't released in the 12 to 18 hours prior to the flooding in Edgecombe. We're just seeking clarification on this. If anyone from Trustpower is listening, please do call in. Bridget Burke, our producer, is also trying to make calls to get someone from Trustpower to explain water flows and water releases from the Matahina Dam above Edgecombe. The rain was forecast, the Met Service had said it would be bad, and Edgecombe has had serious flooding before, but when the water came it did so very fast, and it did so fast that even a town that had been warned and knew what it could be like was caught out by the speed of the water and by how very much of it there was. Jet boats and Defence Force Unimogs were used to rescue people, and pets as water flooded into the Bay of Plenty town, turning the streets into rivers. 1,600 Edgecombe residents, basically the entire population, have been evacuated, along with people from Te Teko and rural communities on both the Rangataiki and Whakatane rivers. Much of the Bay of Plenty town is still underwater tonight. People will not be going back to their homes in a hurry, and we're just going to bring up our reporter Zach Fleming now. And I think if you are watching, you will understand why people aren't going back to their homes, Zach, because there is just water everywhere behind you, and it is running through the house behind you, obviously. What's going on there?
Well, John, we're on College Road, which is the road that runs alongside the stop bank by the river, exactly right where the stop bank broke. And as you said, the streets here are rivers. The houses behind me are, some of them right next to the river, under 2, maybe even 3 metres of water. As you said, though, no residents are coming back. I actually just spoke to one man who snuck through one of the cordons. His name's Simon. He lives at number 44. Just couldn't help himself. He was in Huntly when the flooding happened and wanted to come back and see for himself what it was like. He came back and took a couple of photos. He was trying to be positive about it, but at the moment his driveway is akin to a river more than his home. He said that he was told by Civil Defence that he'd be able to go back in around 72 hours, but he stood there, looked around, looked at me and said that's absolutely not going to happen. He doesn't believe there's any way he's going to be back here in 72 hours. He thinks it's going to be more like a week. As you said, boats are going around to ferry people to their houses or take people out of their houses. This is just absolutely flooded.
Thanks, Zach. Zach Fleming now, cameraman Bradley White, live from the scene. An Edgecombe firefighter has described racing to rescue people and their pets as the streets became rivers. We had a remarkable interview with Tau in the last hour. That's online if you want to read about it or hear it. But Steve Morrissey told our reporter Sharon Brett Kelly how quickly everything was happening.
Yeah, it's pretty horrendous over there. There's a lot of debris around. There's a major current going down through all of those main side streets over the other side, so the river is actually running through town.
How quickly did you need to get people out? I mean, how dangerous was it?
I wasn't there for the initial part of it, but the guys were getting them out pretty quickly. There was most of them ended up getting rescued by jet boat because it came up so fast. We just couldn't get them until the water was actually around all the houses already.
And
Yeah.
what have you been doing for the rest of the day? Was that been the whole day, really rescuing people?
We've just been over clearing the houses, walking through the streets, sort of up to waist deep, just making sure there was nobody in their houses, getting cats and dogs and rabbits out of houses, and yeah, just clearing them, making sure nobody's left.
What have you done with the animals?
The Civil Defence people have actually taken them. Animal Control came out and got some of them earlier on. Yeah.
Have you lived here a long time?
Me? Yep. I've been here over 25 years.
So how does it compare? Is this the worst?
I've never seen anything like it. Yeah, it's terrible.
I mean, they're calling it a 1 in 500 year flood.
Easy. We had one here in 2004, I think it was. It came out this side of town, and all the plains filled up with water. But as far as houses, this is the worst it's ever been.
What is it going to be a major job cleaning up?
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's going to be huge. When this finally goes down, there's going to be that much debris and silt and rubbish to clean up. It's going to be horrible. Some places probably won't come back. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
You think some places won't be livable?
Some places won't be fixable.
Yeah.
Many? Quite a few. It was hard to tell going through because the water's that deep. There's cars that are fully submerged. It's that deep in some places. So it's hard to tell. There might be houses that are off their foundations and all sorts.
What's the worst that you saw when you were going around this morning?
Hard to explain, really. There's caravans and cars that have been shunted down the streets and up against fences and pushed up against each other, and there's the torrent going down the streets, phenomenal.
How does it make you feel being a local, your town?
Yeah, it's not nice. Yeah, pretty sad, really. We'll get it back, and I suppose it'll come back better.
That's a really wonderful volunteer firefighter, Steve Morrissey, talking to Sharon Brett Kelly. Sharon joins us now live on the phone. Hi, Sharon, are you there?
Hi. Yeah, I am, John.
Where are you?
I'm actually on the road to Matahina Dam, and I was going up to Murupara to talk to those 30 people who've been helicoptered out of Minganui because they were in trouble up there. So I was on my way there, but there's a massive slip on the road. I can't go any further. It's pretty frightening, actually. A big chunk of the road has dropped down a good, 50 metres down into the river, and the river is so flooded. It's a big, wide, brown river that's rushing through the trees. There's a massive flood here. So, and a couple of young teenage boys have just driven up here. They live in Matahina, and they're not going home tonight, I can tell you, because they said that the road round the other side, past Te Teko up to Matahina, is also blocked off. So it's pretty dramatic stuff.
Right, and of course that debris and water and all of that rubbish is just washing down the river towards Edgecombe, isn't it?
That's exactly right. So as they're saying, the worst, it's not over yet. Even though they're saying that the water's receded, there's a heck of a lot of water coming down these rivers. And so, as we were hearing from Steve, the volunteer firefighter, a lot of those houses in Edgecombe are in ruins.
Yeah, absolutely. The pictures that Zach's been sending are just devastating for anyone who knows that town. So you're driving up the road towards the dam, are you? Or you were? You had to stop?
Yeah.
Okay,
The dam's only 5 minutes from here, but I can't go any further.
Right, the road has just fallen away.
Yeah, well, a big chunk of it, about a third of it has, and then there's debris. There's just a huge chunk of mud and trees that have dropped down from the hill, because this is a very sort of hilly area with a lot of forest and bush, pretty remote, and it's a massive slip has just pushed down the side of the hill, across the road, and then taken away a chunk of the road and then dropped down into the swollen river.
And Sharon, has it been raining really, really hard since you got there, or is this water coming down from the hills further up the river and an accumulation of flooding from last month too?
No, John, it hasn't rained at all here today. It's been quite funny. I mean, there's the odd shower, but people I talked to said it's rained non-stop for 2 days.
Right.
And so it's just the water that's coming down from the hills, because we're talking about like Harimwana, the Uruweras, all that area there, rushing down from the hills, and they get a lot of rain up there, and it's just pouring down. And I talked to a couple of lifesavers who went out on their boats. They just got back about an hour ago from their boats. They were the ones who were out looking into the houses. They were the only ones who could get in there, because it was even too deep for the army trucks to go in there. They said it was chest height or even higher. So there was a bunch of them that went out on their boats, and they started just looking through windows, checking that everybody was out of their houses. They said it was incredible. It was like a river was rushing through the town. They said it was like being out on their boats on the surf. They had to negotiate through a rushing river.
Absolutely extraordinary. Sharon Brett-Kelly. Do take care, Sharon.
Thank you.
Okay, lovely to talk to Sharon Brett-Kelly, who was on a road that has just basically given away. That's on its way up. So you go through Edgecombe. I'm not sure which side of the river actually Sharon is on. I got a bit confused about that, but there's Te Teko up there, and then you're basically at the dam, and then beyond that you're starting to get pretty remote. Bear in mind, this is not far from Whakatane. As the crow flies, it's no distance at all. Not terribly far from Rotorua or Tauranga, but there is a lot of water coming down from those hills. A former Whakatane mayor says the massive flood that we are hearing so much about, and we've been covering at length tonight, needn't have happened. He says the regional council is to blame. Colin Holmes, who served 2 terms as Whakatane mayor and was also a Bay of Plenty regional councillor, is angry the people of Edgecombe have been given yet another thrashing by an event that he says could have been prevented. Colin is on the line now. Colin, are you there?
I'm here.
Right. Now, look, it's been raining really, really hard, and I just wonder, how do you separate what might have been done from the reality of just torrential rain on the back of the weather we saw last month?
Well, at the end of the day, John, you've got to look at it statistically, and we've had a peak flow through out of Matahina of about 830 cubics, and back in 2004 it was in the mid-700s. That was 13 years ago, and climate change has been right on the agenda ever since then. And there's a number of factors things that haven't been done that should have been done faster and better.
Can I just, before you go on, can you give me the peak flows from the Matahina again from the dam?
And the peak flow in 2004 was in the mid-700s.
Okay, and that was a terrible flood in 2004,
That was a
right?
terrible flood.
So, and what was it today, peak flow?
Today, my understanding is it was about 830.
Okay, so almost 20% more. So why doesn't it stand to reason that you would have flooding below?
Oh, look, I'm not saying there won't be flooding. That's a huge flood. What I'm saying is that if local government had a real appreciation of what climate change meant, and had taken a really proactive approach to it, then we probably had a good chance of preventing what has happened today.
How?
Well, the first thing is we've got to. One of the things that's been lacking in our systems, and I'm going to divorce myself from the hour right about now because I've been pushing hard for these things, as have a number of other people, is the lack of real-time information. It's inadequate, and the forecasting, while it's improved hugely, is still inadequate. In other words, they didn't know. They knew when the floodwaters would peak, but they didn't know at what level.
And can you answer this question to me, because you're talking about the Matahina Dam?
Yep.
Was Trustpower giving out information about, in other words, were the flows, the volume, the amount of water coming out of that dam, that would have been a real indicator to people in Edgecombe, wouldn't they? If they knew what it was in 2004 and it was higher levels today, surely people would have thought, we've got to get the hell out of Dodge, right? Was anyone communicating those figures?
Look, I live upstream, and I haven't been, I've been busy all day looking after my own flooding problems. I don't think it's a lack of communication. I mean, the prevention and management of the flood, or the amelioration of it, is a function of the regional council.
Okay, so are you saying bigger walls, bigger stop banks, what?
No. I'm saying the first thing is better knowledge. In other words, if they had known that the volume of this flood was going to be this much higher, and they should have known, but they haven't invested adequately in real-time information and monitoring of all the tributaries, the bulk of which are up here in the high country, and are very, very volatile, but they just haven't put the capital in.
Okay, but even if you know, that doesn't stop the rain, does it? It doesn't stop the flow out of the dam, it doesn't stop the water.
It has a very big effect on how you manage the two flood defences we have, and one of those is stop banks, which you can't do much with once they're in place. You can't build them up at an instant. But with the Matahina Dam, the reservoir, the management of that is crucial. And if they predict the peak of the flood wrong, and they don't let enough water come through early enough, then they get a bottleneck and they have to let it go.
Absolutely, and they've got no choice.
They've got no choice.
Okay, so because we received an email from a fellow who, like you, knows about how the dam works, and I think the Matahina Dam is probably a new dam for many of the people listening, but he says the flows were surprisingly low between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. this morning, meaning that water was just banking up. Is that your understanding of what happened?
I haven't seen all the figures, but that will be what happened, because if you look at the graph, you can see suddenly they panicked and opened, and by that stage it was too late. So if
they panicked and opened.
Well, you see the graph. Well, if you have a look at the graph.
Okay, sorry, I've got it. I'm just going to get it up here now. So yeah, you keep talking.
Suddenly it goes in a straight line up, and that's when they must have realised they had misjudged the volume of the flood, and that they had to open up the dam. Now, if they'd done that several hours earlier and gone up to peaks of 500 or 600 cumecs for a longer period, they just might have taken the top off this flood. Exactly what happened in 2004. Poor information, poor flood management protocols between the regional council and Trustpower. Result, disaster.
Thanks so much. It's good to talk to you. That's Colin Holmes, who served 2 terms as Whakatane Mayor, was also a Bay of Plenty Regional Councillor. We're getting a lot of stuff coming in. Trustpower operates the Matahina hydroelectric power scheme on the Rangataiki River. This is what we've been talking about. It's not far upriver from Edgecombe to Teko and so on. This afternoon, Ron Quinn asked Trustpower if it was holding back water. Trustpower said because of the heavy rain experienced across many parts of New Zealand, it lowered the lake levels by releasing water at the Matahina Dam. Trustpower says it was working in accordance with guidance provided by the Bay of Plenty Regional Council and flood management plans. This is absolutely fascinating. Right. We're going to try and find out more about the flows out of Matahina between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. It's 23 minutes past 6. Thank you for being with us on Checkpoint. Let's go across the North Island. Whanganui is breathing a sigh of relief today after escaping flood damage, which really had been forecast there. And perversely, the modelling there said it was going to be worse than it was. The state of emergency in Whanganui and Rangatiki was lifted this morning, and evacuated residents were allowed to return to their homes as the river didn't breach its stop banks. But as the rain moved down the country, a student flat was hit by a landslip in Wellington, and Kaikoura was cut off for more than 12 hours after both roads that you can access the town were closed. Tom Furley reports.
The predictions were sobering. Heavy rainfall meant Whanganui was likely to experience a bigger flood than one in June 2015. But that scenario didn't eventuate, and at its peak at 8 o'clock this morning, the Whanganui River remained well confined within its banks. Hundreds of residents who had been evacuated from low-lying riverside areas were allowed to return to their homes, and business owners were also able to go back to their properties on Taupo Key. The owner of Taupo Key's Recaffeinate Cafe, David Miller, is relieved that there wasn't a repeat of the 2015 flooding, which shut his business for a week. He'd used stacked bags of coffee grains as sandbags to protect his store, however says in the end they weren't necessary.
Most of the people obviously would have been affected last time. Some of those businesses, or say the Sergeant Gallery, are closed for 3 months or something, so most businesses, you can't go too long without making a big hole. So they're just huge relief, I think, that it hasn't come over the barriers.
Further south, torrential rain in Wellington last night caused a landslide at a student flat in the suburb of Newtown. Gemma Revel, who lives next to the slip on Millwood Street, says it was obvious something had happened.
We saw this flash and the lights kind of flickered, and then we just heard this big bang, and then we heard a flash again, saw a flash again, so we're like, oh, what was that? And so we just looked outside and saw the commotion.
A stream that burst its banks overnight, forcing the evacuation of 23 homes in the Wellington suburb of Happy Valley, has returned to a reasonable level. In Kaikoura, residents and tourists were cut off for more than 12 hours after the weather forced the closure of both access roads to the town. Last night, the inland route, which partly runs along State Highway 70 through Waio, was closed due to heavy rain, but it reopened for a 3-hour window this afternoon. The only other access road, State Highway 1, south of Kaikoura, has been closed since Tuesday, with rain causing 5 mud and rock slips down onto the highway. A tourist in Kaikoura, Matthew Fleming, was going to use the 3-hour window to get back to Christchurch, but had also booked a flight as a backup.
So we were going to leave this morning to Christchurch, and we've had a bit of a spanner in the works. And we came on the 70 from Hamner Springs the other day. It was quite wet then, and obviously it's got a lot worse.
The Transport Agency is hoping to reopen the inland route again tomorrow morning. In Auckland, slips and flooding continued to be cleared. Contractors worked overnight to help clear floodwaters from the Urupa at Okahu Bay, where greys were submerged yesterday. The iwi has imposed a 3-day rahui on the bay, asking people not to swim or collect seafood. In Kohimarama, contractors continue to remove debris and clean up 4 units hit by a slip, and workers are trying to get pedestrian access to about a dozen properties in Titirangi isolated by a large slip. The Ministry of Education says flooding has closed at least 47 schools and 21 early learning centres nationwide. So far, EQC has received 100 claims from this weather event. For Checkpoint, Tom Furley.
Right, we haven't got long, but joining us now on the phone from the Trust Power Control Room in Tauranga is the CEO, Vince Hawksworth. Vince, thank you so much for calling in. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, John.
Are you happy with the control of water out of the Matahina Dam today? Could you have mitigated the impact of the waters coming down into Edgecombe by a better controlled release in the hours prior to the flooding?
Well, first thing, John, I want to say that look, we're absolutely sort of devastated by what we're seeing at Edgecombe.
Absolutely, on the record. I'm so sorry, but we've only got 3 minutes. So can you answer that question?
The question is yes. And the reason it's yes is because as part of our resource consents, we have to operate to a flood management plan. That flood management plan requires us to lower the lake in these events down to the level of 71.6 metres before the flood. We lowered the lake to that level, and then the lake started to fill as the water came. The effect of the lowering of the lake meant that 20% less water was going out of the dam than was coming in through the catchment. And the lake continued to, obviously because of that, it continued to fill. The whole process we do as part of a flood manager with liaison with the Bay of Plenty Regional Council's flood manager, and have operated absolutely to that program.
Okay.
When you get an event of this size,
Absolutely.
the idea that somehow a dam that would have overtopped with catastrophic consequences had water not been controlled, released, the idea that somehow something different could have been done, I find difficult to accept.
Okay, thank you. That's a very explicit answer. I want to speak directly to 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. because a person who's emailed us and he seems to know what he's talking about is suggesting you could have released more water then.
The whole reason that we didn't, or that we operate the way we do, is because this flow is continuing. The flow is continuing even as we speak now.
Absolutely. And even a dam can only hold so much water. But can we talk to 3 a.m. to 6 a.m.? If you'd released more water then, would less have been required to come out during the flood period?
No.
And you're absolutely certain about this because, boy, people are they're getting in touch and saying that they're not persuaded. You are absolutely certain that you did the right thing in the hours prior to the flood and that you did...
We operated exactly as the flood management plan requires. Let's say if we'd have let less water out in 3 a.m. to 6 a.m., there would have been a point where we were letting a whole lot more out thereafter.
No, sorry, I think the suggestion is you should have let more out then, more out between 3 and 6.
Well, if we let more out between 3 and 6, all we would have done was push more water down the river at that time, and I don't think there's any evidence to say that would have prevented this sort of event.
Okay.
So, and look, this is, and we're going to participate. There's obviously got to be a full review, and we're going to participate openly and fully in that. But ultimately, we absolutely followed the plan that's embedded in our resource consent and operated under instruction as we should do in that event.
Vince Hawksworth, the Trustpower CEO, joining us live on the phone. Then we really